The night the world almost forgot her was the same night everything began to change. Snow mixed with rain as it fell onto the cracked sidewalks of a quiet American city, soaking through the thin jacket of a homeless teenage girl who hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her hands were numb, her stomach burned with hunger, and yet she stopped walking when she saw an elderly man trembling near a closed grocery store, clutching his chest and staring at the ground like hope had finally run out. Before we go deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when people choose compassion over comfort, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Her name was Grace Whitman. She was 19 years old, homeless, and invisible to most people who passed her every day. Once, she had been a bright student who loved sketching old buildings and dreaming about college. But life in the United States isn't gentle with everyone. After losing her mother to illness and watching her father disappear into addiction, Grace aged faster than she should have. Foster homes came and went, and when she turned 18, the system quietly let go of her hand. Since then, the streets had been her address, bus stations her shelter, and hope something she rationed carefully. That evening, Grace had only one thing in her pocket, a small sandwich she had been given hours earlier by a church volunteer. She had saved it, breaking off tiny pieces throughout the day to silence her hunger. When she noticed the elderly man, his clothes worn but neat, his hands shaking as he leaned against the wall, something inside her tightened. He looked proud, the kind of man who once stood tall but now carried the weight of years and loss. She could see it in his eyes, the quiet fear of not being able to go on. Grace hesitated. Hunger clawed at her, and the cold was unforgiving. But she walked toward him anyway. Without saying much, she gently offered the sandwich. The old man looked up, startled, as if kindness was something he hadn't expected anymore. His name was Harold Bennett, a widower whose pension barely covered rent, whose savings had vanished under medical bills, and whose pride had kept him from asking anyone for help. He accepted the food slowly, tears welling as he ate like it might be his last meal. What Grace didn't know was that across the street, sitting inside a black SUV with fogged windows, someone was watching. His name was Michael Reynolds. To the world, he was a powerful CEO of a logistics company headquartered in the United States, a man who negotiated million-dollar contracts before breakfast. But in that moment, he was just a single father waiting for his teenage son to finish basketball practice nearby, replaying his own thoughts about loss, responsibility, and the emptiness success sometimes couldn't fill. Michael noticed Grace because she reminded him of someone he couldn't save years ago. His wife had died young, leaving him to raise their son alone, and despite his wealth, he had learned the hard way that money couldn't protect you from pain. Watching the girl hand over the only food she had to a stranger struck him like a blow to the chest. He saw no cameras, no audience, no hesitation, just pure, selfless compassion from someone who had nothing. After Harold finished eating, Grace stayed with him for a while, helping him steady his breathing until he felt strong enough to walk. She pointed him toward a shelter she knew about, one that served soup late at night. Then, without expecting thanks, she pulled her jacket tighter and walked away into the cold, her stomach empty again. Michael couldn't move. He sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching Grace disappear into the darkness. Something inside him shifted. For years he had donated money, written checks, and funded programs. But this felt different. This felt personal. He followed her at a distance, careful not to scare her, watching where she went. Grace eventually curled up under an overpass, using a cardboard sheet as a barrier against the wind. The next morning, Grace woke up to sunlight and the rumble of traffic. Her body ached and her head throbbed with hunger. She spent the day collecting cans, doing small favors, anything to scrape together enough for food. Late in the afternoon, a well-dressed man approached her near a public library. She stiffened immediately, used to being judged or ignored. But his voice was calm, respectful. He introduced himself as Michael and asked if he could buy her a meal. Grace didn't trust easily, but hunger and something gentle in his eyes made her agree. Over warm food at a small diner, she told her story in broken pieces, never asking for pity, never exaggerating her pain. Michael listened, really listened, And for the first time in years, Grace felt seen. What she didn't realize was that Michael had already made a decision the night before, not out of guilt, but out of respect. He didn't offer her charity. Instead, he offered opportunity. He connected her with a safe place to stay, paid for her GED classes, and later helped her enroll in a community college art program after discovering her sketches hidden in a battered notebook. He made sure everything was done legally, carefully, and with dignity, never once reminding her of what he had given. Months passed. Grace gained weight, confidence, and a future. She worked part-time at a small design firm Michael quietly helped place her in, never revealing his role to her coworkers. Harold, the elderly man, was also found and supported through a local assistance program Michael funded anonymously. Grace never knew the full extent of the ripple her small act of kindness had caused. Years later, Grace stood in a bright studio in New York, her artwork displayed on white walls, her name printed neatly beneath each piece. Michael and his son stood quietly in the back during the opening, pride shining in their eyes. Grace spotted him and finally learned the truth, that the man who had helped her rebuild her life was the same man who had watched her give away her last meal on a freezing night. She cried, not because of the wealth or the power, but because someone had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories of kindness and humanity alive. And before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below one word that describes how this story made you feel, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness by the most forgotten person can change lives forever, including their own.